2, 1.
Hello and welcome to the second of a series of webinars ICT for Education will host throughout the rest of this year. Today's webinar will consider the challenges and opportunities for schools working in the new norm. And obviously the new norm is very difficult to the old norm. My name is Sarah Underwood. I'm the editor at ICT for Education and will moderate today's webinar. Our expert speakers today are Miles Berry from Roehampton University, Fiona Kempton from the Schools Day School Trust, and Matt Hogan from Raspberry Pi. If you'd like to ask any of our experts any questions as we go along, please feel free to put them in the chat box and we'll answer as many as we can. So let's go back to our speakers and let me ask them to introduce themselves. Coming to you first, Miles, tell us a little bit about why you're here.
I'm Principal Lecturer in Computing Education at the University of Roehampton. Most of my work there involves training the next generation of outstanding secondary computing teachers, but I get involved in other things too. So I'm teaching on our digital media degree now, which is tremendous fun. And Roehampton let me out to do other interesting things. So I serve on the board of Computing at Schools and the National Centre for Computing Education, and have been involved in a lot of the projects about implementing England's computing curriculum over the last, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years or so.
That's great, thank you. Coming to you, Fiona, tell us a little bit about what you do here.
I'm a consultant teacher for digital strategy for our trust of 25 schools across the UK of independent girls' schools. We do have one mixed school, an academy. Yeah, I work with schools trying to work out the best ways to do things like home learning and mixed model learning or hybrid learning, which we are currently undertaking.
Excellent, thank you very much indeed. And Matt, coming to you.
Hi, yeah, I'm Matt Hogan. I'm a learning manager at the Raspberry Pi Foundation, and previously I've been a teacher of computer science for over 20 years and ICT before that and a bit of other things. Yeah, so I was a teacher in various different schools as well, independent sector, comprehensive schools, free schools. So I'm sort of bringing a wealth of experience to Raspberry Pi, and part of my role at Raspberry Pi is to within the NCCE, so promoting the online courses and in particular the Computer Science Accelerator program, which is what I'm currently, big project that we're working on at the moment. But yeah, I dabble in other things around the Raspberry Pi and other bits of the NCCE. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
Okay, well, the NCC is something we'll come back to talk about a little bit more, and people can get more information about how to take up the courses, and many of them are not expensive and some of them are even free. So moving on, let's start the conversation, and let me come to you first, Fiona. How do you see the sort of physical challenges teachers and students are facing as they go back, or they are back now, and how are they resolving these kinds of things?
Yeah, we've been back for 4 weeks now, and the teaching at the social distance is probably the first challenge. So whereas we would normally be able to wander around the class, be in proximity with students, there is definitely a feeling of being removed from the more informal discussions that go around in the classroom about kind of formative discussions around children's learning. So that's the first one. And also the time taken. So I teach computing, and after each lesson, because I'm changing classes, we have to clean all of the computers, the keyboards, the mice, and in biology we have to do hand washing as well at the beginning and at the end of lessons. So all of these things just take more time, and also just that feeling of distance from the students.
Okay, Matt, what would you like to add?
Yeah, I was talking to a primary computing teacher today, and he was saying that his computer suite, he can only take one group in once a half term. So the physical access to computers is a real huge thing, and schools vary as well. So, some will allow cleaning between lessons. Some are just saying, no, you can't. Some are saying it's only for GCSE students to use and nobody else. And so, we've got this barrier to access, basically. So, to get online, to do courses, to code. And schools are doing it differently, so some students will be ahead of others, they'll have more access, which is quite worrying really. But yeah, it's difficult. And like what was just said, getting to students, so like once they're in there, actually like debugging code. Before you had to just over their shoulder looking at the screen, and you can't do any of that. So I've had heard stories about sharing screens, so the teachers at the front and you're trying to project screens and it doesn't work, or they're trying to save it somewhere on a shared file, and it's just that added extra complex that it's not like a normal lesson would be whatsoever. So there's a variety of different physical challenges, definitely.
Right. And staying with you, Matt, what are the emotional challenges for both the students and the teachers? As Fiona says, you can't walk about with them, you can't stop by the ones who are a little unsure and things like that. How are they coping with that?
Yeah, I think emotionally, as a teacher, and I married to a teacher as well, and obviously work with them every day. It's like they're not like they don't feel they're doing their job. Do you know what I mean? They don't feel that they're, so the emotional. The teachers don't feel that they're given 100%, learning, 100% learning experience to the students. So I feel, the teachers as well have got this emotional side where they need to sort of think, and the teachers that I've discussed this with, their senior management team are saying, well, actually, it's not going to be 100%, and that's okay. We're in a strange situation. With students, anxiety is a big thing. Not knowing what's going to happen, and not having an answer to that as well is plays on teachers' minds. I've seen really good things about modeling different scenarios that could happen. Modeling that, okay, if you do have to self-isolate as a student, this will be available to you, and having this sort of blended approach of you won't miss out on stuff if you need to self-isolate. And then taking everything away, students are worried that they are going to get the virus and pass it on to grandparents and things like that as well. So that, they are quite aware, I think more aware than I probably thought at first, about their role in the whole pandemic as well, and who they can pass that on to. And so they are very cautionary in doing their hand washing and stuff like that as well.
Miles, what would you add to that in terms of, you work with young students and they would like to be going into schools but they're not, and all that sort of thing? How can you sort of support them?
I think if we're thinking about pupils in school, there's a huge variety there in terms of experience, in terms of emotional need, that for some young people, for some children, lockdown was a tremendously liberating thing. There wasn't the stress of being at school, the stress of all of those expectations, that they were able to spend time with their parents, they were able to explore their own interests and really engage with them. And for some children, this has been a very positive experience, but I suspect they may be the minority. For many, that time lacked any sort of structure and lacked a huge amount of educational input, and many children were missing that very, very much. But I think the thing that many will have missed most of all is the ability to connect with their friends. And okay, we have social media platforms, we have wonderful tools such as Zoom, but it really wasn't the same for them. So coming back to school this month, I think, provides that chance for structure, for routine to be back in their lives, for good or ill. And I think for most this is definitely for good, for teachers who really do care about their pupils and care about their pupils' education, providing that clarity of focus, providing that motivation for when it comes to learning. But really, it's about seeing your friends again and being part of that learning community of your class. Even if it is a bubbled and socially distanced one, it is still so much better for them to be back in the room, back in the classroom, back in the school playground with their friends than in their little isolated home environments. And I hope that, whatever changes over the course of this year, we recognise that that's a fundamentally important thing for school to provide. Yes, we've found ways of providing content, or some schools found ways of providing content and delivering lessons, but that need for young people to connect with other young people is something which school has to be there for, which class has to be there for. And I suspect many of the emotional challenges which we had, particularly during the lockdown period, were because of that lack of opportunity for young people to connect with one another. I think the same is true for teachers as well, that just being back in the staff room, yes, with all of the stress that school brings, is so refreshing after that time sort of spent in isolation, just seeing colleagues or seeing pupils via webcams, even if that was allowed in the school.
Okay, thank you. Well, coming back to you, Fiona, we talked earlier about sort of physical challenges, and you talked about the kinds of teaching you were doing. Can you tell us a little bit more about that in terms of the challenges of teaching and what you can do to resolve that?
I think we're quite fortunate at my school. We are very tech heavy. So first of all, during lockdown, we were using Google Classroom to manage workflow, using Google Meet to have live lessons, and we had every single lesson we taught as if we were there. If there was live content, if there were introductions, we taught them live. Now that we move back into the classroom, Google Classroom continues, so we still distribute work via that, take in work via that, so there aren't any problems in terms of books and the kind of the worry, the anxiety around swapping papers and things like that. There's none of that. There is no paper. It's paperless, and also things like Apple. We have Apple devices, one-to-one devices, and we use Apple Classroom, and it allows teachers to be able to see exactly what is on a student's device. And when we're in the computer lab, we also have something called Impero, and that allows you not only to be able to see the computer, but also to be able to share control of the computer. So when we are doing things like debugging and looking at debugging, we can do that with the student. So that's, we are very fortunate. And now I realise that not all schools have that, but they are definitely, there are things available, but they come at a cost. And so not every school, and I know in the schools that I am a chair of governors, we did a massive fundraiser in order to ensure that every student, they were using something called Seesaw to journal and doing some fantastic work through Thrive on that, and just to make sure that every student had access to a device and access to Wi-Fi, so that they could keep in touch with school. And of course those devices now, those Chromebooks, have come back into the school and are being used in the classroom to help facilitate great communication at a distance. So.
Thank you, Fiona. Matt, would you say that, you know, the actually, we talked about as I said, the physical challenges, but how would you suggest teachers could teach in the new norm?
Yeah, it's using everything, isn't it, that's available to you. And I think the challenges of the new norm, you know, teaching students that haven't been in the classroom for so many months, it's just, you know, getting to know your students again, getting to know what work they've done during lockdown again. You know, not all students are perfect and going to complete all the work that you set over lockdown, but there comes a challenge then of you're going to have a class not just like different ability levels, but also different points across a GCSE specification or your curriculum. So it's getting all that back together is going to be hard, but there are things you can use. You know, there's self-paced online providers that will, you know, give you exercise or give your students exercise to complete as they go through the curriculum. You know, there's different various audit things, Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams, that sort of stuff, you know, all really useful, and you know, are available free or nearly free. And I think, you know, it's just making teachers aware of what they can use to help them. Schools who don't have one-to-one programs and devices that each individual have, you know, maybe rethink, you know, bring your own device. That's been around for a few years now. you know, maybe encourage the use of these things a bit more. You know, it's controversial, isn't it? But you know, there's things out there that children do access, I would think, or have access to, where we can now even more see that they're really useful in an educational context, and even more now we've got more evidence to say, well, actually we need to get our digital skills up, teachers and students, in order to be able to access this material. And I hope you can make the best of the situation you're in. It's just knowing and watching things like this, and getting onto the CAS communities and the computing communities around you where help is there, and to ask people the right questions, and have this sort of blended approach where you're using different things, you're using different devices, you've got different learning platforms, whatever it is, just to use it effectively. And then, that is a challenge in itself, but then that'll gradually become the norm and can be used, we're not in this sort of situation of flux.
Okay, that's great. We talked about all the difficulties. Let's come to some positive changes. Miles, what would you say people can take, teachers and even students, out of this as a result of the pandemic? What positives have come out?
I think we've recognised how absolutely crucial schools are to our society, that even during the darkest days of the lockdown, schools carried on. Schools were not closed. They were there as a place of stability for the most vulnerable children in society, for key worker children and those who were identified as needing to be in school. And for everybody else, there was an opportunity, or at least many schools were providing some continuation of education. And as we now look back on those times, we recognize the importance of schools staying open, no matter what else we have to close because of this. We're determined to keep our schools open, and recognizing the important, crucial role that they play to wider society. And, teacher bashing in the past, we've actually seen now teachers have played a really very, very important role. I think alongside that, we've got a recognition of how difficult the job of the teacher was because of those children who weren't allowed back into school, who were spending all of that time with their parents recognizing how difficult it is, how demanding the work of a teacher is. And so I'm hopeful that one of the things that comes out of this is renewed respect for the professionalism of teachers, despite headlines in some of our tabloid newspapers, perhaps. Alongside that, we've also got this real upskilling in terms of the use of digital technology across the curriculum, that schools, at very, very short notice, moved lock, stock and barrel to providing curriculum content online to a greater or lesser extent. But the web was there, internet access was there, and schools thinking on a sixpence as to how we're able to provide at least some sort of education to all of our pupils. And some schools, some multi-academy trusts, doing that really very, very well. Others perhaps not quite keeping up with the leading edge of the curve there, but still doing their level best in the circumstances that they have. And you see alongside that, teachers' skills in the use of this technology being transformed, and young people's own use of technology for learning being transformed because they had to do it this way. And so I'm hopeful that as we move into the new normal, those tech skills that teachers have acquired, that children have acquired, and the tech infrastructure that schools have had to put in place is something which we'll continue to make use of as we move to a more blended or hybrid model.
Thank you. Matt, how do you see the positives? And sorry, I'm a bit slow on the slides today. But,
No, everything what Miles just said, to totally echo. This enforced CPD on non-specialist computer science teachers, so it's just an appreciation of our subject within education as well. I think it's definitely a positive that come out of this, and also the community. As a teachers themselves, the community that's happened around getting together, helping each other out, supporting each other. Throughout schools, it's quite often computer science departments are a lonely soul when you're the only head of department in there, and suddenly you've had to reach out to people to ask how quickly to transform the learning experiences of your students to an online experience. So I think the really good thing about building the communities has happened and will carry on, definitely. And I think, the students themselves, an appreciation of the subject, and it's all really relevant to every student. So you don't have students going, oh, it's not for me, you know, I'm not a computing person, I'm not that, I'm more into the arts. Suddenly they realize it's, you know, whatever profession, whatever vocation they go into, the importance of knowing your digital skills and your digital literacy, or whatever the term is you want to phrase it, but having that is vitally important. And, you know, it gets, you know, they are aware of that now, without a doubt, that they need it to progress in life and beyond school.
Thank you both very much. And Fiona, you mentioned a couple of kind of tools and solutions earlier. What sort of things are you seeing being used well by schools? Are they complex things, very simple things, things that link together well? What are you seeing?
I think the best strategy that I've seen is where schools plump for one. So we've mentioned today Microsoft Teams. That's used by 50% of the schools within our trust, and Google Classroom and the Google Drive is being used by 50%. And the schools that just decide which, they both do very similar things, but don't try and mix them, because then you get a mess. But yeah, whichever way you choose to go, they've both got ways to communicate that are easy. They've got ways to send work out and to create opportunity for collaborative work and for creative work. And we're seeing fantastic examples of creativity being shown through things like using clips or Flipgrid. Students have been able to record their learning in incredibly creative ways and send that in. And so you get them making choices, which is what I love to see, is when students actually say, I'm going to present my learning like this, and then another student says, well, I want to do it like this. And that was one of the real benefits of lockdown, was the sort of independence that was gained by a lot of students in how they presented their work, in how they showed their learning, because they weren't in a classroom situation in which they were with lots of other people and they were following what everybody else was doing. They were making their own decisions, and that was a real positive of lockdown for me.
Okay, fine. And talking about tools and solutions, Matt, what are you seeing? What's working?
Yeah, any tool really that the students can get access to, they are using really well. We used to, when my last school, we were sort of had a vision of using an iPad, but any tablet, as part of their own pencil case. So, you know, so getting them, this is the problem, you've got to solve it, and you know, off you go. And it was a case of just making them aware that they can present back using a video, an animation app, audio, podcast, whatever, stuff like that, and putting the onus into the learner's hand of how they want to present that back, you know, and almost how they want to learn around the subject as well. So yeah, and that's, you know, and there's, when you do that, you've got to be aware of other things, obviously, like knowledge of the apps, and you have to be inclusive in what you do. You can't just say to, you know, you need a massive broadband to upload this video and stuff like that. So you've got to be careful. But you know, most students during lockdown, I think, has seen that they have technology and they can use that technology as a learning tool, and that could be anything from obviously a Raspberry Pi, iPads, tablets, Chromebooks, laptops, their parents' laptop, you know, the old laptop that didn't work very well, and the parents have got it working again, you know, just to access online content. It doesn't need to be an all dancing, all top spec range laptop, for example. You can access many of these sort of things with low spec devices that can just access online material using Google Suite or Microsoft Teams, or however, your own VLE, for example. And but the key thing is about that is knowing what is effective for the learner to learn. So teachers' knowledge, you know, not just putting it on there for oh, watch this video that I put on the VLE, but actually, oh, why don't you use something like Edpuzzle, which is you can link to a video and you can stop it at different places and have some multiple choice questions going on, and you know, so getting the learner to think about the video, and that's probably the next step, isn't it? But you know, at the moment, it's you know, it's great. They've got really good solutions out there that are being accessed and are being used. And then I think moving forward, it's making effective choices, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Again, this is something we touched on earlier in coming to you, Miles. Children are going back into school. The gaps will begin to show in learning. How can schools help to close that gap? It was just such a big effort before all this happened, and I suspect the gap has opened again perhaps a little bit. How can that begin to be resolved?
This isn't an easy one. It really isn't. I'm fairly convinced that the best way of narrowing the attainment gap of providing the best possible education opportunities to the most disadvantaged pupils is simply through excellent interactive whole class teaching, bringing young people together into a room with a really gifted teacher and letting that teacher inspire and motivate and challenge those young people to produce the best possible work that they can. We do that in the physical space, and great teaching is still great teaching. So it's worth thinking about, why is there this sort of attainment gap? Who is it that's struggled most with this 5-6 months away from school? And my suspicion is it is exactly those most disadvantaged children in our society. And how can we use technology to give them the best possible opportunity to catch up? Well, one of the things to do is to make sure that they do have the technology. I think we learned very quickly into that lockdown period that actually the children who didn't have the device of their own, who didn't have the internet connection, were those who found it almost impossible to keep up with any schoolwork that was being set. So making sure that the most disadvantaged in our society have got access to the internet, access to content there. Think of the pupils in your school who cannot get onto Wikipedia, who cannot access the school's learning platform or cloud-based technology solution. And think about what we can do as education providers to provide the connectivity and the kit to those young people. It's not enough, but it's going to help. It will certainly do no harm. Being able to teach yourself something, being able to access that content really does matter. There are lots of other things we can do as well. So the schools that did well during that period were the ones who were really engaging parents, providing opportunities and support to that home-based learning environment. So let's carry on doing that well, getting parents directly involved in children's education, and particularly where those families are from the least advantaged parts of our society, and coming up with clever solutions to support parents in continuing to support their children in their education. And other things that we learned how to do during that online period of recording our lessons. Let's not stop doing that all of a sudden. Let's carry on making a recording of what we're doing now that we're back in the classroom, and providing that as something which our children can continue to access. So if there was something they weren't perhaps quite sure about, then look, you can have another look at this. This is something where you can wind the tape back, review that content. There are things which it was really easy to do during that period, which is worth carrying on with now.
Okay, great. Fiona, what would you say there to try and help children and teachers close the gaps?
Yes, well, I would say that flipped learning is a great model to try and make sure that everyone enters your classroom on maybe as even a footing as you can. So I always try in my GCSE computing lessons to ensure that I give some content before the lesson, so that as homework, so we actually don't do consolidation homework, we do advanced homework, and using Edpuzzle or Seneca or GCSE Pod, all I'm not sure about GCSE Pod being free, but Seneca and Edpuzzle definitely are free and really easy to use online tools that can provide flipped learning tasks for students, so that when they come into the lesson, any gaps that may have been there through lack of understanding during lockdown, hopefully can be, at least they can jog their memory to something and then come into the lesson and participate, feeling as confident as anyone else.
Okay, time will tell on this one. It's a very difficult one, as Miles said. Let's come to the nitty gritty of it, Matt. And you don't exactly work for Raspberry Pi as a foundation, not a vendor, I think, if I'm correct in saying so. But when you're talking to schools, how do they want to work with people who provide them with, sell them, basically, software, hardware, whatever they need?
Yeah, I mean, they've got to realise, I think, that perhaps it's not a priority of schools at the moment, really, but, even technicians are making things work in school, and network managers. But yeah, try and get them to try and get try to get supplies in school. They are allowed in school. Perhaps have a fresh look at what they've got and offer support in that way of saying, okay, we can provide you with X, Y, and Z to allow better bandwidth for your school, or provide a cloud-based solution that will give you free access to some of the tools and not all the tools out there and all the features. So perhaps just hosting files if you haven't got something like that. And have a really good two-way communication with suppliers and the school. And then build a relationship from there, really. Schools will not really, they want to get the best offers, obviously, from suppliers. They want to be there to see the benefit of that product that the suppliers are trying to sell. So they've become, I think, during lockdown, network managers and account holders for technology development have become very aware of what bits of their tech works and is useful, and what bits aren't so useful as well. So they are very aware of everything that they want to purchase from now onwards. They've got to see the educational benefit of that for the students in their school. So that's got to be very, very clear when suppliers talk to schools. That is more than ever now. That's happened. They've seen that this works, that doesn't work. So as suppliers, they need to go in with a top priority of how does it have a positive impact on the learners in your school.
Okay, Miles, what would you add to that?
I think it's worth acknowledging how really very supportive of what teachers and schools have been doing. The big tech firms like Microsoft and Google and Apple have been. That, the Office 365 stuff is essentially free as a license for individual students. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Google Apps for Education is pretty much free for anybody to use that, at least in a limited sort of way. And these were our lifesavers during this lockdown period. And I think we continue to find really clever, really innovative, exciting ways of using these general purpose tools. So spending the time on training teachers, on upskilling teachers to be able to use these general purpose tools as effectively as they can across the whole of the curriculum, across the whole of the school community, I think is tremendously important. That said, you do need the kit and you do need the connectivity. So there's a really important role for our tech suppliers, the local firms, in providing kit to students, in providing kit out into schools, and in ensuring that we have really good internet access and Wi-Fi and network access throughout the building. And there must be some clever solutions that those who've been providing really good internet connections out into school can do the same thing for our students at home, particularly those who perhaps haven't been able to access the internet from home as much as others have. Then we get into the sort of niche, particular products for particular purposes. And I agree a lot with what Matt has to say, though, that there has to be a strong case for this is to the benefit. We know that these are tried and tested solutions. Lots of schools have been using these very, very successfully. Hear the case studies, see the evidence that this has made an impact on young people's educational outcomes. I think one of the things that we saw during lockdown particularly was this, the free trial. So during this period, you can access this content, you can use these tools for free for a while. And I think, that's a really very helpful thing for the ed tech industry to do, that teachers got a chance to try these out, admittedly, and under far from ideal conditions. And so I'd hope that the ed tech firms see that that actually really did work to their advantage, that giving teachers the chance to try these out, giving young people a chance to have a go with these things, and then see for themselves that this was just as good as the marketing blurb said it was, or perhaps in some cases wasn't, was a really important thing.
Okay, that's excellent. And staying with you, Miles, if you talk us through some of the courses and so on that are available in regional and government terms for schools at the moment. I don't know if you want to talk about some. Matt wants to do some. Start with your favourites.
Oh, okay. So, the controversial thing first. I think the DfE were really very, very slow to realise their obligations in terms of providing a national scale solution to the thing that they suddenly imposed on schools. That once we heard that schools were going to have to close to almost all of their pupils, DfE really ought to have been on the case and thinking, what can we do to help here? And so setting up some content, here are a set of national lessons that teachers can point their pupils to. Clearly some people aren't going to have access to technology, so let's get that sorted as well. And it should not have taken as long as it did for the department to recognise their obligations in that area. If other countries could do it, then why not us, I would ask. So yeah, they've caught up though, so things are a lot better now in terms of that sort of national provision. And so you've got Oak National Academy now providing that set of content so that if we go into some other lockdown, local lockdowns, then pupils have still got content that they can keep up with. And there's really good content on there. It's lovely to see the computing content on there coming through the National Centre for Computing Education. Matt may want to say more about that subsequently. So we've got a good online curriculum. Took us a little bit of time to get there, but we got there in the end. Okay, it may not suit every teacher's pedagogic approach, but it's better than not having that. It really is. We've got other stuff too. So we've got the EdTech demonstrator schools, which admittedly were running previously to this, of giving local schools in their area, schools in their network, that sort of hands-on support of this is what we've tried, this seems to work. In our context, try it for yourselves, we're here to help you. We've got grants from central government about setting up that sort of cloud-based platform using Google or using Microsoft, or so I'm sure possibly other services are available in that space. And that's great to see as well. And we did have that provision eventually, and here's the kit, here's the connectivity. And I think the schools ought to recognise that even if that's not provided by central government as hypothecated funding, then that's perhaps not something which, or perhaps something which pupil premium money could go towards. I'll let Matt talk about CPD. I suspect he's dying to say something about that.
Matt, do you want to fill us in a little bit more about the regional and government schemes that people can use?
Yeah, sure. So so the National Centre for Computing Education, there are regional hubs, computing hubs, that are all up and running now. So, get in contact with the hubs if they've not contacted you already, and they will help and support you. So they'll direct you if you contact them. They can offer you a range of support. Some of that maybe even giving you like a subject matter expert to actually come into school. So if you're thinking of delivering GCSE computer science next academic year, it's all free, and they will come in and sit down and go, okay, we'll work out a plan before you start delivering it in September. We give you a bit of money as well, okay, so that we can sit down and help you provide a really good GCSE computing course for next September. As if you're already doing GCSE computer science, or you've got some non-specialists coming in trying to teach computing at this time, we do have online courses for them to do. So, and a computer science accelerator program, which is a certified program, which at the end of it you get a little certificate and you graduate with a certificate saying that you can teach computer science GCSE. So that would be good to get them on. Various online courses, remote courses, which used to be the face-to-face courses as well. So that's really good to access, and get your non-specialists along to that as well. And also the Oak lessons, which they've come from the Teach Computing curriculum, which is part of the NCC as well, and that's fully launched. So that's from Key Stage 1 to Key Stage 4, lessons, lesson plans, learning graphs, assessments, everything that you need to give or to teach computing throughout the national curriculum, including GCSE. So that goes into that much depth. So the Oak Academy's taken that and changed it into those videos. So they had to adjust it slightly. So you could have this idea of, okay, if someone's off, your teacher's absent, or maybe you have a non-specialist that, is perhaps teaching, I don't know, binary conversion for the first time and haven't, or do some live coding and they haven't got the confidence to do it in front of children, they can grab the Oak National Academy stuff, blend it with the lesson plans that Teach Computing provide, make it their own and make it suitable for their own environment. They can it's all free, so they can download stuff, they can upload stuff to their own VLE, Google, Microsoft, whatever. So being aware of, this support is out there for you, and use it. The primary teacher I was talking about before, he was like, this is amazing, because he's gone into a school where the computing curriculum hasn't been updated for the last 5-6 years. That's probably one of the reasons why he's been recruited. So he's going to just take all of that and that's it. He will change it obviously as time progresses, and it does need to change, and the lessons themselves are being updated, so you need to get the most updated lessons, but that's all done, and it's all done to a really, really high quality standard, and it does take time, as Miles said, so that's why, really, because the quality, it's not just one teacher tapping away and then going, right, here you go, this is great quality, it's tested, it's quality assured. The other thing as well is, other local charities. Raspberry Pi work alongside a charity called School Home Support, for example, and they provide, through them, we provide Raspberry Pis and also internet connection as well. So there are charities out there that may be available for some of the, children that haven't got internet access, that can help and support them in that way. So giving them a dongle, for example, to access via the mobile data network, and I think they've got something going with BT as well. But yeah, so there are avenues out there and support out there regionally, nationally. If you're thinking of things like Code Club, for example, remote code clubs. At A level, we've got Isaac Computer Science, which is part of the NCC as well. Again, all student-facing stuff. If students are off for the self-isolating, you can just say, okay, go on to Isaac Computer Science and complete this topic, do this exercise, do that game board, it's called, testing at the end of that topic. So all these things are out there. And I think in some guys, they may have been around, there may have been a YouTube video, which I used to use, of someone explaining binary conversion in a very, not a very quality assured way, but this has got a rubber stamp on it so that you can use all these different things. And I used to waste a lot of time, huge amount of my teacher's time, of trying to search for these things, and probably then after searching for an hour to find the right YouTube video, just go, oh, I'm going to do it myself, and then spend another hour doing it myself.
Yeah, Fiona, you'd like to comment?
I was just going to say that I did a Raspberry Pi Foundation course during lockdown on Future Learn as well, which was about teaching computing. So just to strengthen my programming skills when I was preparing my students for the NEA. So there's also Future Learn has Raspberry Pi Foundation courses, and it was absolutely excellent. So.
Thank you very much.
Good to know. Okay.
We were that's part of the Computer Science Accelerator program as well. So teachcomputing.org is where you go to sign up. But yeah, and those online courses actually can be taken by anybody over the age of 13 as well. So we did convert some of the courses during lockdown to student facing, but if you're talking 15, 16-year-olds, they could probably get by. It is aimed at teachers, but they'll be aware of that.
I had a student who has ASD, and she found it very, very difficult to engage in live lessons on this kind of format, and so instead did the Future Learn course and worked where she didn't have to engage in a Google Meet or a Zoom conversation, and could still work on could feel like she was making progress with her programming skills. So
that's awesome to hear. I'll feed that back to the team. They'll be really pleased.
Excellent. Okay, well, we've talked a lot about how things are going at the moment and what's available, and it's very difficult to look further out, but so let me come to you. How do you expect things to sort of pan out in terms of what people using, how they're teaching? Is it just going to be completely in flux depending on how the environment is?
Well, I think One of the significant changes is confidence in using these tools. So I'm optimistic about this, and I think teachers are going to be a lot more willing to bring in digital elements or digital tools and use those in traditional classroom-based lessons when they might previously have been reluctant because they had to acquire these skills. Now they feel a lot more confident in using these. And I'm speaking of my colleagues at Roehampton as well as the folks my students are working with out in school here. But I think there is that sense of, yeah, I'm willing to have a go at this. This works, I can use these things now. So I think we'll see a lot more of that. I think for young people themselves, there's been a change in seeing digital technology is not merely somewhere we go for entertainment or for a social life. This is also a place I can go to learn things. This is a place I can go to teach myself something, as well as accessing educational content that others are pointing me to. And okay, that may not be all young people, but that's certainly been one of the changes, one of the things that's happened over the last few months, is that recognition that I can learn something myself. If I've got the motivation, if I've got access to the technology and the content, then there's so many brilliant resources, brilliant bits of content out there that I can access. And that ability to pursue your own interest, I hope, is something which we'll see continue. I suppose the other thing worth saying is that the technology itself continues to advance, that new things come on stream. None of us, 5 years ago would have believed that we could deliver so much of the classroom experience through video conferencing using tools that are as easy to use as Google Meet and Zoom and Teams and other platforms that are available. That this is just one of the ways that this hasn't been nearly as awful as it could have been. And we're seeing similar sort of advances in so much technology. Look at what we can do now with speech recognition. Look at what we can do now with other aspects of artificial intelligence. Look at what we can do now with fully automatic machine translation. That as the technology continues to improve, I'm hopeful that young people and their teachers will continue to find ways of bringing that into the classroom, making that part of their education.
Thank you. Fiona, how do you see things panning out for the rest of the year?
I would totally agree that I would love teachers to not lose the skills and the students to lose the independence and their creativity that they've gained during lockdown, and also to not kind of stop collaborating, because I think one of with other teachers, because one of the best things that happened during lockdown was we almost stepped outside and reached out and said, well, what are you doing that's great? Because I need some ideas. I need some ideas of what I can do. So sometimes that doesn't happen very much. Does it happen maybe more in the primary setting, but in the secondary setting, it's all very much kept in departments. And I think that there was so much talk about what worked across subjects, what tools were great for communicating, what tools were great for kind of helping students research during lockdown. So not to lose those skills and just to build on them really, and to keep thinking about how to bring the best of lockdown and bring it into the classroom and to apply it there would be fantastic. But also to use, I think there's fantastic support provided by all platforms in terms of the Microsoft Educator Centre, in terms of the Google Teacher Centre, you've got Apple Teacher Learning Centre. There are so many places where you can find support. And as we move forward into a period of blended learning, it's important that teachers continue to hone their skills and to see how they can fit this new norm best.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Well, bringing it all together, perhaps each one of you could give sort of a couple of pieces of advice that teachers might be able to take away from our conversation. Fiona, what would your advice be?
I think whatever you choose to do, keep it simple and create a routine that you're comfortable with and your students understand and that you can all kind of stick to, and so that either the physical classroom, if that's when they come in they do this and then when they leave they do this, or the hybrid classroom where you're having to set up your device to film yourself at the same time as you're teaching some students in the room, is just a place where everybody feels comfortable and knows what experience is expected. Because just as we can be overwhelmed by different formats of tasks and different systems, so can the students. So the more simple that we can keep it and more consistent across their different lessons and their different experiences, I think it's just the best for all of us.
Excellent. Miles, what would you say? Top tips for all the teachers out there who are working so hard?
I think this is really about the culture of your classroom, the culture of the learning community, whether it's a physical or a virtual space, is less relevant as to how the people are with one another that you're working with. I think if we have to pick priorities for that, part of this is about kindness and recognizing how important it is in these times and in all times that we be kind to one another, we look out for one another, we take care of one another. But this is also about curiosity and capturing that spark or nurturing that spark and giving people, broadening their range of interests, encouraging them to go and find out about things for themselves. But it's also about creativity, recognizing that, as Patrick said all those years ago, we learn best through making things to show to others. And so this isn't just about access to content or the delivery of content. This is about using these tools to make things, to bring something fresh into the world.
Excellent. And some final words of advice from you, Matt.
Teachers, firstly, they're teachers, okay, and they're very good at recognizing what Miles has said about, the relationship they have with their students and how that's formed, and keeping that going and recognizing, supporting the emotional well-being of students. That's their top priority, I think. Making sure their students are cared for in a way that is stable, and then after that, bring on everything else we've been talking about, but in a way, like Fiona said, something that works for them. So it works for them and their learners and their students. So yeah, and bringing that forward. So just making sure that that works, that's having an impact on their learning, a positive impact on their learning, and in a safe environment, whether that be online or in the classroom. So keep it simple, and you will make mistakes. I've made mistakes. Everybody's made mistakes, and we'll continue to make mistakes. I've had dogs, cats, children slobber over me during conferences like this. I've learned to shut the door and put a sign on it now. So we will make mistakes, and that's okay to make mistakes, and it is not normal again. It's the new norm, so it won't be 100% of what you want to achieve as a teacher, but that's okay.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, all of you, so very much for joining us today. Very interesting discussion. And hopefully we can bring that back to the conference centres that we frequent next year. I'm not very hopeful that we'll be able to carry out our programme this year, but we'll let teachers know if we are going to be able to. Otherwise, we'll be back next year in March in Brighton, in May in Norwich, in Sheffield in June, and in Manchester, it seems a long way away, in October 2021. We do have plans for this year, but it's proved very difficult to actually pull them off. So we really are looking forward to next year. We really are hoping that we'll be able to spend some time together in the room. It will be a great pleasure. So finally, just a very big thank you to Miles, Matt and Fiona. Thank you so much for joining us. Good conversation. And if you have feedback for us or any ideas on topics you'd like us to cover in another webinar or keynote address, please do email us. So in the meantime, thank you all very much indeed for joining us, and goodbye.